Welcome to this panel debate about future workspaces. My name is Henrik Lübker. I'm the CEO of Design Denmark, which is the largest member organization of designers and design thinkers in Denmark. The reason why we are actually doing this panel debate is kind of like it's almost like a pre-arrangement for what we're going to do this fall in lieu of Lifestyle and Design Cluster and Design Denmark. We are doing kind of like an examination by 6 different designers and case companies about how the future workplace can look in each of these companies. And then we're hopefully going to have a seminar later on in the year about this topic. So this is kind of like it's a little bit explorative, and I've invited some very knowledgeable guests here to help me explore this topic. And since it's about the future also, it is kind of like a look into the open. But it seems to me as if our relationship with the workplace is ever changing. I remember reading German critical thinker Theodor Adorno when he in the 1950s and 60s, he was talking about how our leisure time, our free time away from work, with the 8 hours of work, 8 hours of free time and 8 hours of sleep, that division, he said, no, that's the leisure time is really just a preparation of work. Because we're spoon-fed with all these simple things that we shouldn't, that tries to hinder us of thinking about our role in the world, but just to amuse us so that we are ready to go back as a cog in the big machinery, in the big industrial wheel. And then we've seen all these different examples of what work can be. Just think about the open planned office with all the small cubicles, or just the day before yesterday, I was at Blocks Hub, and this is the idea of creativity and open spaces, and then they have to put in mute boxes because sometimes you need to do deep work or actually have a conversation with someone who's not at Blocks, or have a phone call or something like that. So it's kind of like, it seems like that there is a lot of tendencies, or there's almost like there's a struggle between managerial ideas on one hand, and also what we want as employees on the other hand. And so how do these things entangle? And now, of course, with COVID-19, we had kind of like 2 years of thinking, a period away from work to think about what we want, and we can see that different trends is emerging. I heard Harvard professor Ray Chodbury. He has recently stated that, at least in tech businesses in the US and England, work from anywhere. That is the new reality, because the top talent, they demand the opportunity to work from anywhere. And he says, if top talent demands it, that is what's going to happen, because if you are an organization, you need to follow the top talent, because otherwise you'll dilute your workforce. What he doesn't take into account is, of course, come in. What he doesn't take into account is that you're not starting out as a top talent. Maybe you're starting out as a junior, and you also need to have a senior. You need to spar together with a team to become that top talent. So it seems like that the work from anywhere, it might be a trend, but it also poses a lot of questions. And I'm a little bit kind of like, I think it sounds a little bit weird that we go back to, for me, work is meaningful also, and it goes back to a very contractual stance that I deliver some work and I want to do it from anywhere, because I don't want to have that meaningful relationship to my work. So this is something that some of the things that we're going to explore today, and there's a lot of questions and flying around, and I hope that you have some as well. But before you get the time to chime in, of course we'll have a debate with our very knowledgeable paneliers. And I think we can start over here. Studio Heime and Kasper, could you please just give a very short introduction of yourself?
Of course. I'm the co-founder of Studio Heime, an architect firm in both Iceland and Denmark. And I work with transformation and interior design. And then we are specialized in natural materials and recycled materials, which we incorporate into our design. More or less that. We have experience with both space planning, interior design, but we also work like classical workspaces, but we also have design workspaces in other contexts without desks. But in general, we just have a focus on the use of the a good indoor climate, use of natural materials, colors and lighting. So that's what we work with.
Great. And Tine, you've been at it at a very long time, I know.
Yeah, Tine Mouritzen. I'm Director and Head of Workplace Advisory at Colliers. I have plus 22 years experience in interior design and furniture design. Mainly the past 10 years with focus on office spaces and office interiors and workplaces and spaces. Designing that and advising in the ever-changing trends and tendencies and also the workers and the human-centered approach. How do we as humans interact and socialize and work together in a space? So that's my take on it.
And finally we have Signe also, which is kind of like, if we say the smaller studio, and you're working with a large company,
bigger,
and then we have the startup over here that has novel ideas about how to investigate the workplace.
Yeah, I'm Signe and I come from Aeon Furniture, and we are trying to incorporate all the new tendencies that we see in the future way that we see work. Also what Tine talked about, you know, the more people-centered approach of what work should be in the future. And then concretely we are working with creating a furniture as a new workspace for the private homes, but potentially also for the office spaces. Yeah.
Very cool. And a warm welcome. And I think I'd like to, instead of just going out into the future, I think this notion that things have been shifting all the time, that there has been different ideals. I think that it could be interesting to just explore a little bit, you know, going from an experience-based point of view. So Tine, as I said, you've been at it for a very long time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us just briefly a couple of shifting notions of what the good workplace have been through the years?
Well, 20 years ago, it was definitely focused on the height adjustable table. Everybody wanted the height adjustable table, and it didn't even matter if it was in an open space or a single office. It was like, I want my desk. And then it's been shifting to the more open-spaced, activity-based functionality spaces and interiors. And then over the past 2 years, it's been a hectic couple of years, and of course on a not so good pandemic, but for offices and workplaces it's been a crazy time, because it's been so interesting actually for people in my field, what we need as people and also as offices and companies, what they see and look for. Of course we would like to work from home and have the flexibility. We found out that we could work from home before the pandemic. We saw that it was like, oh, you're working from home, is it because you have a craftsman coming over, and the leadership was not confident that you were actually productive and effective when you work from home. And then the pandemic hit, and we actually showed everybody that we could work from home, and we were good at it, almost too efficient and almost too productive. So stress is also a factor. And yeah, so it's been crazy. It's been going from just having your own desk to this. What is it that actually drives people, and how do we get them to come back to the office? Because we've been so used to now sitting in our own kitchen, no noise, no colleagues, and maybe also a bit lonely. But yeah, so why do we go back to the office, and how do we get the people back? That's kind of our focus now. Yeah. The experience-driven, as you also mentioned, is and the socializing is a huge factor right now, that we need as people to be, I don't know, what was that we called it? Flock mentality?
Group mentality.
Group mentality. That we need as human beings to be together socially. So the fact that we can work from anywhere is actually both good but also bad, seen as from a human perspective and a socializing.
So would you say that your field has kind of like expanded
Yes.
in the sense that normally you were just concerned with the relationship with the environment and the tools and how humans interacted at the office?
Yes.
But now it's more like kind of like
the flexibility and the balance. Now it's not work-life balance, it's life balance, it's balance. and the flexibility. It's not. That's actually the key words, and yeah, it has shifted. It's not just about functionality and a height adjustable table now. It's not so much activities, but actually how do we interact as people and collaborating and socializing.
So it's almost becoming more an anthropological study than it's just about ergonomics and stuff like that. Kasper, from your point of view, if we are in this expanded field, what kind of requirements do we then need to kind of like succeed in terms of having this not work-life balance but life balance apparently?
I thought about this question, and I think the most important thing, which I always fall back to, has actually nothing to do with architecture or interior design. It's actually good leadership, and the demands today you see, it's all about good leadership and a good boss, and actually divide you. Yeah, but it really is, because there's more and more focus on the individual, but also the collective. So as I see it, if you have a tendency, I think it's more towards even more the humanistic approach, where we talk about you have both the collective, we need to have a good team spirit, we need to have a good efficiency at life. You go to work, you get your colleagues. So there's that side of it, where you as a person wants to feel comfortable at work. You want to have activity-based sort of workplaces where you can sort of activate yourself in. But then also for a company's side of view, there is also sort of this, how do we sort of get the most out of our employees, and how do we keep our talent? So that's the collective part of it. But then also there's a really, really big move towards sort of you go from the rights to the privileged way, where you sort of say, I have the right to lunch in this hours, I have the right to holiday, I have the right to go home at 4 o'clock. But where I think, and this is also just a guess, and of course we're talking about the future, but I think there is a shift towards very much the privilege, where you sort of have to discuss with your boss or your leaders about, how do I become most efficient? Do I need to go home at 2 o'clock and then work 1 hour at night? Because that's what fits into my sort of daily routine, and that's how I become most efficiency. And then everything, all about this really falls back to the leadership. Because if you're not a good leader, you can't sort of control these things, and that's the demand. So and then our architecture and the way we design as a team up here, it's all about sort of creating these frames. But if the boss can't sit down and talk to you on this specific task, this is how we're gonna sort of solve this. This is okay. This task, okay, you can work from home, I can work from here. We have to have lunch these 2 days. Nothing is fixed. That's because then you get the most out of it. And you can see, and that's also why it's so dangerous if you can't sort of implement these things if there's no dialogue between the team and the top. And I think that's the most important thing, is actually education team-wise, leader-wise also.
So we're really going from a very interior design and spatial planning is going from being something very concrete to being the theory of everything.
No, I don't think so, because I actually think the space itself can be quite concrete, because you need to go in and look at function-based and activity-based design, and I think we can really much do that. And I think, and if you go in, but you also know more about that, and then you also have to have big data and how does a firm work, what do people want, and that's where sort of some of your experience.
Yeah, we definitely look at the company DNA, and of course also the space, the building. There are framework that we need to kind of use, and also base our interior design of course. But the company DNA is important, both retaining and attracting talent, and creating loyalty to the company. You were saying that if you can work from anywhere, how do I get a feeling of which company am I working for? I could work for Google, or I could work for Apple or something like that. It didn't matter if we don't have any connection to the company and the company DNA. That's
because the collective feeling is still super important for people. And as I understood it, if we work too much away from home, you don't get that. You need to work for it. You need to work as a person. You need to come to work some days at least.
Yeah.
And so it is really much.
And I think we're gonna get back to that kind of like the community discussion of it, and how do we do that actually. That's very interesting. But we need to get Signe into the conversation as well. And Signe,
That's right.
because Because now I think what we've heard over here is kind of like the expansion of the field in some sense, and that you can't make the division between work and life anymore. It's kind of like there's a fluidity, even though that there's this work from anywhere strand that tries to divide it again. But you are then going the other way, as I understand it. You're kind of like taking all the wholeness of it all and putting it into a concrete product.
Furniture, yeah, exactly, yeah. But very much in line with what both Tina and Kasper said. We really much believe that we have to take the way we understand work and shake it a little bit, and then see how we can actually create concrete frames for all human being, and human being motivated differently, being different kinds of wholes, so that they can get like the good surrounding frames, both for the physical and the mental health, to actually be the best of themselves, like maybe when they are sitting themselves, but with the belief that we can only give the best to also the collectiveness of a firm by being the best of ourselves from the inside. And with that, like, to take that from being very much a big topic to more concrete, for us it's very much about the economics in the furniture. The fact that it's very important that we feel safe in our surroundings, in our workplace, that we do not have our back free. We are comfortable. We have the possibility to protect our spine in the best possible way, so that we both that we don't need like therapists in different. Both for our physical health and our mental health, so much as today, and then. With this furniture, we give everybody a possibility with 1 square meter to have a safe place at home, where we hopefully can inspire people to also want to come to the collective, but at least a possibility to be focused and creative and come back to the importance of creating meaning, which is very much the importance of work, but also the importance of the collectiveness that we have.
I'm really looking forward to seeing that this furniture, and we talked about presenting it here, but then we wouldn't talk about anything else. So I think that everyone who wants to hear more about how you have solved all these things in just 1 square meter after this talk,
go check their website.
Tina will be happy to demonstrate. But anyways. So we've talked about, how the shifting, that maybe the work that you guys are doing has changed and evolved and has become you need to be experts on a much larger field. If you see the trends for the future workplace, and now I stated in the beginning that it's just work from anywhere. Quoted this Howard professor. Is that something you see happening as well, Tina, here in Scandinavia or Europe?
Not quite, but at some extent, all the companies and the leadership. We had a big survey in January, with 350 Danish leaderships being asked questions about how they saw the future of work, and they wanted to give the freedom to their employees to choose if they wanted to work from home or from the office and stuff like that, but. A lot of people, they are confident that everybody can produce and be effective working from home and working from the office. But we see that more and more people actually wants to go to the office, because we're social human beings, and we need knowledge sharing. We need, you were talking about younger generation talents. How do they learn the trade? They learn it from older senior employees and colleagues. And I think it's a combination. I don't think there's either or. And I think that the challenges with working from anywhere is also IT security, sitting from a beach in Thailand and working with somebody in Denmark. Of course, we can do that, and we've shown we can. But is it giving us the connection to the colleagues, to the
But
company.
do you think it's a Scandinavian thing, this kind of like community? It almost seems like it's kind of like either you believe that everyone is an island, or you believe that we are connected and we need each other to grow.
I just came from Chicago, from a Neocon show in Chicago, which is the contract trade fair in the States, one of the biggest ones. And sorry to say, but everybody is talking about coming back to the office and sitting at a height adjustable table again. Or in the States, it's not a height adjustable table; it's a really small cubicle. But in Scandinavia, of course, there is global differences. But I think we still need to create these spaces where we can meet and where we can collaborate and share our knowledge. Again, it's we're social human beings. I think we just want the flexibility. We want to be able to make a choice and create our daily routines and pick up our children and work from home. If we have focus work where we don't want to be disturbed, we would like to sit at home maybe and not be interrupted every half hour by stuff that is going on in the office. That's one of the biggest concerns right now. That's actually noise, because we've been sitting by ourselves for 2 years and we're like really sensitive about noise at this point, because it's just sitting next or standing next to you can be like, oh, visual noise. It doesn't have to be audio noise. It's just like, oh, you're really close. So we've got these. We're not comfortable around people, and we need to relearn that and relearn how to be at a.
But I remember just in my previous job, just a couple of years ago, I remember, the distrust that was between employer and employee. If you took a day off, you was kind of like, oh, he's probably just working on his house or something like that instead.
But
Kasper, do you think that is something that has has COVID changed that relationship? Do the employees and the employers want the same? I think, or is that?
I think they have been forced to actually accept it, and they also learned that you can trust your employees if you give them trust. So I think there's something that luckily they've been forced to do, and then not luckily enough also that if trust is given, most cases is also it comes back. So yes, I think the COVID has definitely changed everything.
But studies also show that.
And studies shows, because
crazy.
and I think so I can only say yes to that.
So the stress that you were talking about, Tine, that earlier that has been a consequence of working from home. Where does that come from, do you think?
Well, it comes from that we've been secluded from people and from each other and from noise. We've been used to having a lot of noise around us, and then suddenly we've been at home. So of course that's changed our way of interpreting everything, and you're also working on that with your product, how to kind of have your own back. And we kind of need to get that security back in our work life, I guess. And also during new products, we see that there's a focus on developing new furniture pieces, because we have different demands now with the activity-based. With activity-based, it's been here for a while, activity-based workplacing, but we've just had certain furniture types to work with. And now we see a really interesting development in the furniture production, actually, that they need to enhance acoustics, comfort, mental health also.
And Signe, you are working both, from all these modern ideas, but you're also talking about feng shui, for example, as part of the way you design that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we really believe that also from what Kasper said, that it's very much this humanistic approach, that was also what you said, that it has to be very people-centered, and also in order to create, security and that we have the security as human beings and the trust around us. It is very much about the balancing of the inner you, also for giving the best to the collectiveness, as I said before. So it's very important with the inner energies, even though it sounds a little bit a little bit high in the sky. It is a very old tradition that we can actually take a lot from. And what's very interesting is also what Tine says, that we come from office spaces right now, where with the economic, like from the earlier days, we are very used to wear a suit. Work in Denmark from 8 to 4 and abroad is from 9 to 5. Sit at the now adjustable table, hooray.
Only in Denmark
or
Scandinavia.
Yeah. And in Denmark we are very privileged. I don't remember the number of square meters, but it's very...
it's 18 to 20 per employee, and in other countries it's 3 to 7 square meters.
So we're very spoiled.
So we're spoiled.
Yeah, but still, it's like a former approach to work, that you put on a suit, you get a maybe adjustable table, maybe 18 square meters and a chair, and then this is just how you have to work. So there's not taking different personalities are not taking into account. It's more like from the neck and up. If we
it's all size, one size fits all.
Or maybe 4, because we have the disk analysis, right? But we have to remember that we are different, and also that maybe for some people the current or the former culture works very well, and that should also be embraced. So it shouldn't be like, now you have to be the innovative type that has to be sitting on these futuristic furnitures. We have to create spaces where everybody can have the trust. And looking into Feng Shui, for example, we have some of the very old traditions of security, securing your back, and also with the lighting, that is very important, both for our mental health, but also for our work optimization, that is also taking into account. And of course, as you said before with the sound, the acoustics is a very important element today, because we are very disturbed.
Sound, lighting, and biophilia actually, and mental health.
Yeah.
Like greenery is also really big at the moment, that we need a pause and we need nature inside, close to us.
So it seems like there's an open opportunity now, and there's a lot of potential, and you know what works and what the direction you want to go in. But what kind of hindrances are there to creating that kind of utopian workplace where it is life and it's not work and life, but it's just a part of your essence? And I don't know, Kasper.
Yeah, but I think there's at least 2 things that is a big thing, as we talked about. I think one thing is that some of these things also need extra square meters, and can you even afford to have
even more?
Even more? No, but because
in Denmark.
Actually, because 20? You can see the trend is that you need more square meters, and there are some tendencies also to go, do you want to give up your desk? And that's something that is really much tried out these days. And I feel like, or in my opinion, I'm curious to see where we're going to do, because I also have a feeling that people want their desk, and of course also in a lot of jobs you need your desk. I don't want to clean up my desk every day when I go home, because I also just leave all my color codes and everything on the table, and that of course different from work type to work type. But that's one thing I'm curious about. But that also means that we need extra square meters. And what do we do with these semi-small big offices? Like 15, 10, 20, 30 square people offices, can they afford to expand? So how do they create their workspace? And that's different types of workspace. And that's a lot of them that I work with also. That's the scale I work with. And I think then we are back to the other thing again, where, okay, we can at least, of course, we can do a lot about the indoor climate and sort of do the interior correctly within those square meters we have been given by looking into their needs. But then again, I think it's very much, again, about how do we sort of design our work life? How do we design that personally, individually? And I think that's going to be a huge challenge that I'm going to be curious to see whether or not the offices can sort of incorporate. And as an architect, I really feel comfortable that we can sort of solve a lot of the tasks that at hand, because we go in every time and we sort of study and say, okay, what do we need? And then we look at the trends now and see, okay, let's try this out. But then the big thing is that we need the big data from you doing so much. The bigger firms are so important into this, because they get all the data back that we use, because we only, like all the small offices like me and a lot of other people, we only see like small sort of touches. So it's all these big data is going to be super important to see after, so we can sort of evaluate on that. But I think we're going to need more square meters. I don't think people want to give up their desk in the long run.
No, I visited a very successful design company in Copenhagen last week, and they were, doing check-in desks to have a desk, and the creative director said, "Yeah, well, I'm not very good at it, so often I come to work and I don't have a desk." Yeah. But since you can't just expand the buildings, and you probably want to be in Copenhagen if you have a successful big design company, what do you do then? How can you work around this?
Well, you try to get your employees to think about if they could potentially share their desk. Because when you see the data, you actually see that 50% is out of the house. They are at meetings, they're working from home, they're traveling, they're sick, they are vacation times and stuff like that. So even though you really want your own desk, then sometimes you actually only sit there half an hour a day. So that's of course also a potential square meter discussion. And then again, if you tell the employees that, well, you get this out of it, you get social areas, you get breakout, you get plants and other cool stuff, good acoustic, better lighting, then often they are interested in sharing desks.
So is the future workplace, is that smaller cubicles but larger communal areas?
Yeah, well, it's not cubicles, it's work zones.
Work zones.
Work zones, yeah. I don't think we're gonna get cubicles or single offices back. I think we're gonna get focus rooms that you can book. I think we're gonna get work zones or home zones or whatever you wanna call it. But and then there are the collaboration zones and project areas and meeting rooms that are smaller than we're used to. We've seen in a lot of office buildings during the past 20, 30 years, it's been, we need meeting rooms that are 10 persons and 14 and like really big meeting rooms. And now we see we're actually focusing on the 2 to 4 person meeting rooms, because normally a lot of the time there will be only 2 persons in a meeting room, because it's Kasper and I discussing colors, or you discussing...
And we also need to come to the importance of colors.
Yeah, because colors is really important.
On this one, Henrik, because it's just, when I look, for example, these office hotels, just in the last 6 years since I had my firm, they also have been, there's been so much development, and then you're looking from the States and what are they doing. But you can also see that it's not going that well, especially the office hotel I've been working on, in the way that we have this idea about you want to have sort of fly desks, or you come in and you pay less, and you want to have these zones for working. But in the end, all the office hotels I work on, they come down to having small closed offices for the smaller firms. And then they have, because all these flight desks, that didn't work. And I'm curious to see that tendency where we are going, especially when you're small firms. And I'm not out at Danish as a DAC, they also have the blocks. And when I talk to people, a lot of people are happy about it, but it's also money-wise, you know. But if they can choose, they want their own closed office. But of course, it's a fine balance, and I'm curious to see where it's going. That's more or less it. But I think Denmark is too small to some things compared to the USA, States, another way.
Okay, I want to jump a little bit, shift gear a little bit, because I think we've talked a lot about sustainability in the sense of what it means to be a sustainable human or sustainable work life. But there's also, we are at the Circular Furniture Days. And it's also, Kasper, you mentioned that you worked a lot with the recycling and upcycling and stuff like that. Yeah. And of course, that is part of your product as well. So I'm looking a little bit for, what do you think in the future the importance of this, that the furniture, that the environment is something that is more recycled or has a more sustainable footprint? Is that something that is going to be a demand from the employees, or something that will come naturally? I don't know, Signe, if you're working at least with developing this.
Yeah. So what we see right now are very new and concrete standards So we see a lot of demands from the European Union at the moment. So we see that the governance is following with standard and demands to be followed in the future for your CO2 emission. We also hear a lot of talk about CO2 being a new currency, actually. So that in the future it's not only the price that you buy based on that you actually see the footprint. Already in Singapore, when you buy food to go, you see how many liters of water has been used to produce this to-go meal. So yes, we hear a lot about the tendencies of this circularity in the future in the production. So it's very much. I'm very glad that the focus is actually on this circularity, because it's actually very important these days that we focus on the whole production line, from when the tree is planted until we stand with a piece of furniture, and that is what the standards are introducing at the moment, and that is very interesting how. It's both in the production, but it's also in the lifespan. So we're talking about generations of lifespan. We're talking about keep concepts. So it's a lot of new words in the terms of circularity and the circular economy.
Yeah, and so there's a political pressure on one side. And Kasper, have you then just been had the foresight enough to kind of like say, yeah, I'm working with small companies. We just want to we find a niche that we can kind of like promote ourselves on. Or is it something
I
deeper?
think luckily enough, I think now I'm so lucky that I'm part of this group of new young architect firms that we sort of have a connection, and I can sort of see that we are just a generation of people who are interested in sustainability, if we have to use that word. Like we all have our own approach to how to make this world better. And we do that in different ways. And I think luckily enough, there's just a movement that if you don't have focus on that, that's just wrong. Like it's just such a basic thing, at least in the architecture, you need to be aware of it. And then because it's such a big field, you decide where to approach and how to approach it. And also, and you can say, if you look at the future workspace, yes, all buildings need to have certified sort of, you need to build that sustainable. Like, so in regarding to that, but what we need to be aware of, that just because a building is built within the regulations, that doesn't mean the workspace itself is sustainable. And that's where we can come in and compete. So I think that a big challenge for us is actually to say, now the building is done, but you have to actually still have a consulting in to actually design your actually workspace, because that's depend on who sort of moves in and who is there. So for me, a big step would also just to be, if you have a consulting afterwards, actually to help you. That would be such a massive thing, actually. So, and luckily enough, I see this comes from two ways, you know. There's sort of the people mentality. We are being, as a person, we are being more aware of the spaces we are in. So the pressure is coming from down, and then it comes political. But then it has to meet at the workspace. And
Tine, what about the employer mentality? Then you're working with often kind of large scale.
Yes.
Is that something you need to push for, or is it something that is actually in demand from the employer perspective?
It's actually a demand also now.
Okay.
It's how much can we reuse, and could we move into existing, or could we renovate our existing spaces? That's also sustainable, not building new, but although that could be GNB certified and stuff like that, but it's still more circular or sustainable to renovate existing buildings. So that's interesting. And then from an employer perspective, it's of course the good story. You were talking about that it comes from down. The employees also want to be in a company that is thinking about the world and is sustainable and responsible, and not just buying new because that's trendy or something like that. So there is a demand of ESG, and we have over here traceability is also something that we are looking into.
And Tine is pointing to something
you can see.
The one who's with us online cannot see.
Sorry about that.
Previous talk 3 times in that talk. So.
Oh, but it says traceability. That's one of the points over there on the circular economy, and I think that's interesting and disassembly, of course, that we can take a chair and get a new color of the seat and stuff like that. Disassembly.
I think we could probably go on for time, but a long time. But we also need to get the floor if there's any questions. Because we have only 5 minutes left, so I can see that there's a question down there.
That went by.
It's a comment.
But, yeah, I think it's not necessary.
Well, it is for people online.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's very important to say that when we're talking about circularity and circular furniture, we have to talk about sharing spaces. And it's not an issue to say and go out as a consultant and say that we need our own table, we need our own desk. This is not sustainable. We need to be more aware of sharing. If your square meters about 3 to 7, was it in?
That was not in Denmark.
No. It was in where
in the US.
In US,
in
and
UK.
we have 18 to 20.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of a way to go to be more sustainable, just in case of the areas we are using, and that's so important. So the most sustainable areas and the most circular furniture in these areas is the one that we share and use for more than one.
But right now we're also seeing a trend that is where you kind of can rent the furniture. That's also more
I am
circular.
an architect and space planner myself, so I'm very much aware of this.
That's really a nice trend actually, and a good trend for the world and the use, how much we use furniture.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else have a comment or a question? I'm running down to you, sir. Here you go.
Yeah, thank you for.
Hey,
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. Online.
we just lost
Mic drop.
15 online.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think first, thank you for a very interesting conversation. And I was just wondering, like, how all these trends are converting also now on the level of architecture in the typology of headquarters. Are we seeing a kind of diversification of the type of headquarters? And do you see also, especially with your international background, do you see a form of regionalism in how the headquarters actually are set up? And
if they are shared in a building, or?
no, I'm more like thinking like, if we wind back to the kind of...
Go in and look at Lego. They just changed their sort of strategy for how they are gonna designing their headquarters. And Lego, yeah, the headquarters, and they actually have a pretty good strategy about that. And it's very much about everything we talked about here. And they call it best of both. Their strategy and the way they approach that. And I think that's super interesting, and it's going to be fun to see how that works. And that's with shared desk, and they lost their desk, and they have only activity based. And this is where that's in the entire world where they work 3 days. 3 days at the office, 2 days home, I think. That's how I remember it. And it's all about, but it's not just working away from home and away. And at the office also, everything about the leadership and the team spirit and both the individual and the collective. I think it's super interesting, actually.
But we also see that companies kind of share a domicile. Earlier, in the past, I've seen that they just had their own domicile. Now we kind of see that companies share domiciles, like headquarters, and then they have shared facilities, canteen, meeting centers, and other amenities. And that kind of also is, in my opinion, a more sustainable way of using the square meters, and also canteens and everything is, so it's not just empty space when you...
Shared spaces.
Shared spaces, yeah. So we see a shift in that. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
And all in all, we also see like like we see a very big tendency to just be curious at the moment about this responsibility that companies and individuals tap in differently in their own ways and try out with common domiciles or with bigger square meters for being social. So we see that people tap in of this circular in different circular ways, and I think that is very important that we just all try to motivate this curiosity right now, because there are no like set frames. The certifications are still to be completely set. The measurement of the footprint is still to like come out in standards. So I think it's very important that we embrace the curiosity, but also very important that, as Kasper said earlier, that we focus on the data that we get, because that's going to be essential for having something that is transparent for the user or the employer or the employee. The data is going to be very essential that we collect it and that we share it.
And also the legislation.
Yeah,
I think we are lucky in Denmark that we actually have legislation in the workspace area, because other countries doesn't or don't, and they kind of, maybe it seems a bit extreme to talk about square meters in London and in Denmark, but it is because we are regulated here in Denmark, and I actually think that's a good thing. So we don't sit in small cubicles.
Yeah. We have a final question over here. Or comment?
No, it's interesting. I'm actually from Chicago, and I'm a remote worker that works at Google. And so, like, it's interesting that all the things that you
came back from Chicago.
I know. Yeah, we'll talk. But what I just think is interesting is, like, for us, we're definitely like embracing remote fully, but we're trying to be social creatures and do summits together. Like I just flew out to San Francisco to like meet my team for the first time, which is wild. But I think something to think about, like outside of what Scandinavia is nice, is like I can pop on a train and be in another country in like an hour. But in the States, that's like Chicago is a 4-hour flight to San Francisco. And so I think something to think about in the sustainability is like the travel, like the carbon footprint in the air and stuff like that. And like, how do you tackle the socialness when everybody is so far away, like geographically? So I guess I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just something that started kicking in my head. Yeah.
But it is interesting with the work from anywhere, and Google, I believe, was one of the first ones that said we don't need an office.
Oh yeah,
in 2020, wasn't it?
We were all supposed to go back, and then the demand, to your point earlier, was like nobody's going, and you're going to lose the top talent. So that's why they had to kind of force their hand a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Great. I think the sum up is more or less that we are in the midst of the great transition. And it's not a transition to either or, at least not here in Denmark, but it's something where we can reinvent new ways of developing work communities and being social. And I think that is very exciting times to be in. So thank you to the wonderful panel.
Thank you for being here.
And thank you all for coming, and please enjoy 3 days and circular furniture days. Thank you.